The world turned red. Not the clean red of blood or fire, but the rust red of a planet dying. The wall of dust rose a kilometer high, blotting out the sun, turning day into a sepia nightmare. Staff Sergeant Cassidy Graves tasted sand between her teeth, felt it grinding in her lungs with every gasping breath. 5 meters away, Master Sergeant Boyd Crowder lay motionless, half buried in the drift. Above them, a shadow moved through the storm. Not the wind, not debris, a man. Cassidy's hand found the knife on her belt as footsteps crunched closer. The enemy was hunting blind in the Haboob, but so was she. And in zero visibility, the predator wasn't the one with the gun. It was the one who heard you breathe. The air tasted like rust and regret. Staff Sergeant Cassidy Graves pressed her eye to the spotting scope, watching heat waves twist the horizon into liquid glass. 300 meters below, the desert floor shimmered in the kind of heat that made grown men see things that weren't there. She'd been lying on this ridge for 6 hours, and the stone beneath her had gone from cold to scorching, baking through 2 layers of thermal matting. Movement, she whispered into her throat mic. Southeast corner, near the burnt-out technical. Behind her, Master Sergeant Boyd Crowder shifted his position with the kind of careful economy that came from 30 years of not getting shot. At 62, he was old enough to be her grandfather, but his hands on the M110 sniper rifle were steady as bedrock. "I see him," Boyd said. His voice carried the flat drawl of someone who'd been born in Alabama and never saw reason to leave. "That's our friend with the limp. Security detail just changed shifts." Cassidy adjusted the scope's focus, bringing the ruined fortress into sharp relief. The structure dated back to the French colonial era, crumbling walls of red sandstone that jutted from the ridge like broken teeth. The locals called it Qasr al-Aqrab, the Scorpion's Fort. Below it, in a natural amphitheater of stone and sand, today's transaction would take place. If the intel was good, if the Haboob held off, if 100 other things didn't go sideways first. "You counting prayer beads again?" Boyd asked without looking at her. Cassidy realized her thumb was working over the worn groove in her rifle's stock, a nervous habit she'd picked up in Kandahar. "Just thinking. Thinking's dangerous out here. Gets you killed. So does not thinking." Boyd's chuckle was dry as the wind. "Smart mouth on you, Graves. That's why I requested you for this op. Thought it was my sunny disposition." "That too." He reached into his chest rig and pulled out a small leather Bible. It's covered dark with sweat and age. He kissed it once, tucked it back. "We're good for another 2 hours before the wind picks up. HQ says the storm's tracking northeast. Should miss us by 30 clicks." Cassidy checked her watch. 14:30 local time. The exchange was scheduled for 1600, 4 p.m., when the sun would be low enough to make thermal optics tricky, but bright enough for everyone to see the merchandise. A dirty bomb wasn't the kind of thing you bought in the dark. She scanned the compound again, methodically cataloging every detail. 2 guard posts on the north wall, a heavy machine gun on the southeast tower, currently unmanned. 4 vehicles in various states of decay, but one, a white Toyota Land Cruiser, had new tires and a fresh coat of dust. That was the seller's ride. The buyer would come from the west, across the open desert. And when he did, Cassidy and Boyd would be the eyes in the sky, calling in the drone strike that would turn this whole valley into a parking lot. Clean, simple, textbook. She should have known better. "Tell me about West Texas," Boyd said, his eye never leaving the rifle scope. Cassidy didn't look up from her range card, where she was marking wind values and elevation corrections. "You've heard it before. Humor an old man." She sighed, but there was no heat in it. Boyd did this before every mission, got her talking about home, about something clean and far away from the blood and the sand. Some men prayed. Boyd made you remember why you were fighting. "Flat land," she said. "So flat you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. Sky so big it makes you feel small. Good people who don't ask questions they don't want answers to. Miss it? Every day. Then why'd you leave? Cassidy smiled without humor. Same reason you did, preacher. Because flat land and big skies don't teach you what you're made of. Boyd grunted approval. Your daddy's still running cattle? When the drought doesn't kill them first. She finished marking her card, tucked it into her sleeve pocket. He thinks I'm doing logistics work in Germany. Safer that way. Lying to protect folks you love, Boyd said. That's the first honest thing a soldier learns. Below them, the fortress compound remained still, except for the guard shift rotation. 3 men moving with the lazy confidence of people who didn't expect trouble. Why would they? This was neutral ground, 40 kilometers from the nearest government checkpoint, in a corner of North Africa where borders were suggestions and sovereignty was whoever had the most guns. Cassidy pulled out her canteen, allowed herself 2 small sips. The water was blood warm and tasted like plastic, but it was wet. Boyd caught her eye and tapped his own canteen, still 3/4 full. The man rationed water like it was liquid gold, which in this country it basically was. You ever work a desert op before? He asked. Iraq, Mosul, 2019. This ain't Iraq. Boyd's tone shifted, going serious. Iraqi desert, you got infrastructure, roads, wells. This place? He gestured at the endless expanse of red dunes. This is the devil's country. Sand gets in everything. Your rifle, your lungs, your mind. Heat makes you see things. Cold at night makes you wish you were dead. And when the wind comes, he stopped. Cassidy followed his gaze north. On the horizon, the sky had changed. What had been pale blue an hour ago now carried a tinge of ochre, like someone had dragged a paintbrush dipped in rust across the world. That the Haboob? She asked quietly. Boyd pulled out a small weather monitor, checked the barometric pressure. His jaw tightened. Maybe, too early to tell. HQ said we had until tonight. HQ's in an air-conditioned office in Djibouti. Fair point. Boyd keyed his radio. Overwatch 2 to base, requesting updated weather satellite on the northern quadrant. We're seeing color shift, possible early front development. Static crackled. Then, base to Overwatch 2, stand by for satellite relay. They waited. 30 seconds. 60. Cassidy felt sweat trickle down her spine, soaking into the waistband of her combat pants. The sun was a physical weight on her shoulders, pressing her into the stone. The radio clicked. Overwatch 2, negative on storm advancement. Haboob is tracking 30 kilometers northeast of your position, holding steady. You are clear for mission window. Boyd and Cassidy exchanged a look. Base, Boyd said carefully. We are visual on atmospheric disturbance bearing 010. Recommend we push the timeline up or scrub until tomorrow. A longer pause this time, then a different voice, higher ranking, less patient. Overwatch 2, this is actual. Intel window is now. Targets are confirmed for 1600. If we miss this exchange, the package goes underground for months. You have your orders. Base out. The radio went dead. Boyd didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he reached back into his rig and pulled out the Bible again. This time he didn't kiss it, just held it. Preacher, Cassidy said softly. I'm not a praying man anymore, Boyd said, but I'm thinking this might be a good time to start again. The heat was a living thing. By 1500 hours, the temperature had climbed to 45 Celsius, 113 Fahrenheit, and the air had gone thick and syrupy. Cassidy's mouth was dry no matter how much water she sipped, and her skin felt like parchment stretched over bone. Boyd had gone quiet, which was never a good sign. The old man didn't do quiet unless he was worried, and when Boyd Crowder was worried, everyone else should be terrified. Talk to me about your breath control, he said suddenly. Cassidy blinked. Sir? Your breathing, when you take the shot. Walk me through it. She recognized this for what it was, A teaching moment disguised as conversation. Boyd's way of keeping her sharp when the waiting got dangerous. Breathe in, exhale halfway, find the natural respiratory pause. Squeeze through the pause. And if your heart's racing, 4-count combat breathing. In through the nose for 4, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 4, hold for 4. Repeat until heart rate drops below 90. Good. Now tell me why that matters in heat. Cassidy thought about it, watching the shimmers rise from the desert floor like translucent snakes. Heat raises heart rate naturally. Dehydration makes it worse. If I'm not controlling my breath, I'm not controlling my pulse. And if my pulse is spiking, you're jerking the trigger, Boyd finished. Even a 1/4 millimeter pull to the left at this range means you miss by 2 feet. And out here, missing by 2 feet means the package moves, people die, and we go home with our asses in a sling. Understood. Do you? Boyd shifted his weight, stone crunching under him. Because I've seen good shooters, great shooters, lose it in the heat. Saw a Marine in Fallujah, 2004, best marksman in his platoon. We were set up for a vehicle interdiction. Temperature was pushing 50 Celsius. He started seeing things. Thought his spotter was talking to him when the man hadn't said a word in an hour. Took his shot 2 seconds early, missed the driver, hit the passenger. Turned out the passenger was an Iraqi judge trying to defect. Cassidy felt her stomach tighten. What happened? Judge bled out before we could call in a medevac. Marine ate his sidearm 3 weeks later. Boyd's voice was flat, empty. Heat doesn't just cook you, Graves. It gets inside your head and rewires the circuitry. You start trusting things you see instead of things you know. And in this business, the difference between seeing and knowing is the difference between going home and going home in a bag. I'm good, preacher, I promise. I know you are. That's why I'm telling you this. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were the color of flint. When the wind comes, and it will come, you're going to see things that aren't there. Shadows moving, people calling your name, your dead boyfriend from Kandahar telling you to lay down and sleep. None of it's real. The only real thing is the mission and getting us both out alive. Can you hold on to that? Cassidy met his gaze and didn't blink. Yes, Sergeant. Good girl. Boyd returned to his scope. Because we're about to get company. Cassidy swung her spotting scope southwest. At first she saw nothing but sand and heat shimmer. Then the shimmer resolved into movement, 3 vehicles kicking up dust plumes, moving fast across the hardpan. Range? Boyd asked. 5 clicks in closing, 2 technicals with mounted 50s, 1 civilian SUV in the middle. That's our buyer. Boyd's voice had gone cold and professional. Base, this is Overwatch 2. We have 3 vehicles inbound from the southwest. ETA 12 minutes to the compound. Requesting confirmation on drone positioning. Overwatch 2, stand by. They waited. Cassidy tracked the vehicles through her scope, counting heads. 8 men in the lead technical, 6 in the trail. The SUV's windows were tinted dark, no way to see inside. The radio crackled. Overwatch 2, Reaper 3-1 is on station at Angels 20, payload armed and ready. You are cleared to observe and direct on target confirmation. Roger, base. Overwatch 2 is eyes on. Cassidy felt her pulse quicken despite her training. This was it. The moment they'd spent 3 weeks preparing for, living in caves and pissing in bottles and eating MREs that tasted like cardboard soaked in sadness. The vehicles reached the compound and stopped in a coordinated formation, defensive positioning, no amateurs here. Men dismounted with the smooth efficiency of trained soldiers, forming a perimeter. The SUV doors opened last. A tall man stepped out, dressed in Western clothes, slacks, white shirt, expensive sunglasses. Cassidy dialed in the scope's magnification, bringing his face into crystal clarity. Got him, she breathed. Ahmad al-Sistani, the merchant. Confirm ID, Boyd said. Cassidy checked the reference photos loaded on her tactical tablet, compared them against what she was seeing. Distinctive scar on the left cheek. Check. Gold watch on right wrist. Check. The way he moved, confident, almost theatrical, matched every intel brief they'd received. Positive ID, she said. That's our primary target. Good. Now we wait for the seller to show the merchandise. But something was wrong. Cassidy felt it in her gut before she could articulate why. The men around Al-Sistani were too tense, too alert. They weren't acting like people at a business meeting. They were acting like people expecting trouble. And then she saw it. On the northern horizon, that rust-colored stain had grown. The sky was no longer blue with a tinge of ochre. It was turning the color of dried blood, and it was spreading fast. Boyd, she said quietly, I see it. That's not 30 clicks away. No, it's not. The wind hit them like a slap. 1 second the air was still. The next, Cassidy was choking on dust, her eyes streaming tears, her mouth filling with grit. Boyd was already on the radio. Base, this is Overwatch 2. Abort, abort, abort. Haboob is inbound, fast moving. Our position is about to be compromised. The radio exploded with static, and below them, in the compound, Ahmad al-Sistani smiled. Get down, Boyd shouted over the rising shriek of wind. Cassidy flattened herself against the stone as the first wave of dust slammed into their position. Visibility dropped from 300 meters to 50 in the space of 3 heartbeats. She fumbled for her goggles, snapping them over her eyes, but the dust was already everywhere, in her nose, her throat, grinding between her teeth. The world turned the color of rust and rage. Boyd's hand found her shoulder, squeezed once. She could barely see him, even though he was less than 2 feet away. His mouth was moving, but the wind tore the words away before they could reach her ears. She pressed her face close to his, shouting, Radio? He shook his head, pointed at the handset. Dead static. The dust was so fine it got into everything. Electronics, weapons, lungs. It was like trying to breathe flour. Cassidy's training kicked in. She pulled her shema up over her nose and mouth, creating a makeshift filter. Not great, but better than drowning in airborne dirt. Beside her, Boyd was doing the same, his weathered face disappearing behind layers of cloth. Through the screaming wind, she heard something else. Gunfire. Not the sharp crack of disciplined shooting, but the wild chatter of automatic weapons firing blind. It was coming from the compound below, muzzle flashes visible as orange strobes in the brown murk. Boyd grabbed her arm, pulled her close. His lips nearly touched her ear. They're shooting at shadows. Stay down. But Cassidy's mind was racing. If the storm had hit them this hard, that meant the drone was blind too. Thermal imaging wouldn't work through this much suspended particulate. The Reaper might as well be circling the moon for all the good it could do. Which meant the mission was dead. Which meant they needed to extract. Which meant... Her thoughts skidded to a halt as she saw movement through the dust. Not in the compound, closer, much closer. 30 meters downslope, a figure was climbing toward their position. Cassidy's hand found her sidearm, a Sig Sauer M17 that wouldn't jam as easily as a rifle in these conditions. She tapped Boyd's leg, pointed. He turned, saw the figure, and his hand moved to his own pistol. The figure resolved into a man, his face wrapped in cloth, his AK-47 held low and ready. He was moving methodically, searching, his head sweeping left and right. He was hunting them. Cassidy's pulse hammered in her throat. How? How did he know they were up here? The storm should have provided perfect cover, unless he'd known before the storm hit. Unless Al-Sistani had spotted their position hours ago and waited for the perfect moment to send his dogs. Boyd's hand moved in tactical sign language. Hold. Wait. He passes. We slip. Cassidy nodded, pressing herself flatter against the stone. The man was 20 meters away now. 15. She could hear his labored breathing, the crunch of his boots on loose rock. 10 meters. 5. He walked right past them, close enough that Cassidy could have reached out and touched his boot. He paused, head tilted, listening. Then he moved on, disappearing into the swirling dust. Boyd counted to 30. Then he grabbed Cassidy's arm and pointed east, away from the compound, away from their extraction point, away from everything they'd planned. They moved. It was like swimming through concrete. Every step was a battle against the wind, which hit them in gusts strong enough to knock Cassidy sideways. Boyd led, one hand on the rock face, the other clutching his rifle. Cassidy followed, her world reduced to the patch of dust-stained cloth on Boyd's back. They'd covered maybe 50 meters when Boyd stopped so suddenly Cassidy nearly ran into him. He turned, his eyes wide behind his goggles, and pointed down. At their feet, barely visible in the dust, was a tripwire. Cassidy's breath stopped. She followed the wire with her eyes. Couldn't see where it led, but she didn't need to. Tripwires meant mines, or booby traps, or some other nasty surprise designed to turn living people into meat confetti. Boyd was signing again. They knew, they prepared. This is a kill box. The enormity of it hit Cassidy like a physical blow. This wasn't an interrupted transaction. This was a trap. Al-Sistani had known about the surveillance. He'd known about the drone. He'd waited for the storm, maybe even counted on it, to level the playing field. And now he was hunting them for sport. Boyd's hand found hers in the swirling dust. His grip was iron hard, anchoring her to reality. He pointed at the ground, drew a zigzag pattern in the air. We go slow, we sweep for wires, we survive. Cassidy nodded. They moved again, even slower this time, testing each step before committing weight. The wind screamed. Dust filled Cassidy's world. Her lungs burned. Her eyes watered behind the goggles. Every muscle in her body begged her to run, to sprint blindly into the storm and hope for the best. But hope wasn't a plan, and Boyd had taught her better. They found shelter in a crack in the ridge, barely wide enough for both of them, but deep enough to provide relief from the wind. Boyd went first, clearing the space with his sidearm before waving Cassidy in. She collapsed against the stone, gasping. Her throat felt like she'd been swallowing glass. Boyd handed her his canteen without a word. She drank, forced herself to stop after 3 swallows. "How long?" she croaked. Boyd checked his watch, then looked at the wall of dust outside their shelter. Storm this size? Could be an hour, could be 6. Extraction? Not until this clears. Helos can't fly in 0 visibility. He pulled off his goggles, rubbed his eyes. They were bloodshot, ringed with red dust. We're on our own. Cassidy's training said to sit tight, wait for the storm to pass, then call for extraction. But her gut, the same instinct that had kept her alive in Mosul, said something different. They're going to move the package, she said. Boyd looked at her sharply. What? Think about it. Al-Sistani knows we're up here. He knows there's a drone overhead. He knows the US military is breathing down his neck. She leaned forward, intensity building in her voice. But he also knows the drone can't see through this storm, and he knows we can't call for backup. This is his window. He's going to complete the transaction right now, in the middle of the Haboob, because it's the only time he's safe from satellite imaging and smart bombs. Boyd was silent for a long moment. Then, "You're right. Damn it, you're right. So what do we do?" Standard protocol says we wait for extraction. Standard protocol doesn't account for a dirty bomb hitting the black market. Boyd's jaw tightened. Cassidy could see the war happening behind his eyes. Duty versus mission, survival versus the greater good. These were the choices that destroyed good men. The impossible math of trading your life for the lives of strangers you'd never meet. If we move now, Boyd said slowly, in 0 visibility, with hostiles actively hunting us, our odds of survival drop to maybe 30%. And if we don't move, that package disappears, shows up in 6 months in Marseille or Istanbul or Brooklyn, kills a few thousand people, probably more. Cassidy met his eyes. Then we move. Boyd stared at her for 3 long heartbeats. Then he smiled, not a happy smile, but the grim smile of a man about to do something heroic and stupid. "You know," he said, "I told your CO you were too smart for your own good. He said that's why he was sending you." Boyd pulled out his Bible, kissed it one more time, then tucked it back into his rig. "All right, Graves, here's the play. We split up. Like hell. Listen," his voice was iron. "I draw their attention, keep them busy. You slip around, get eyes on the transaction, find out where they're taking the package. Then you call it in when the storm clears." "That's suicide." "That's the mission." Boyd checked his rifle, chambered around. "You're the better shot. You're faster. You've got 30 years of life ahead of you. I'm old, I'm mean, and I've been looking for a good place to die since Fallujah. This is as good as any." "Boyd!" "That's Master Sergeant Crowder, and you'll follow my orders, Staff Sergeant Graves. Is that understood?" Cassidy felt something crack in her chest. "Yes, Sergeant." "Good." Boyd gripped her shoulder, squeezed hard. "You get out of this, you find yourself a nice Texas boy, have some kids, tell them their mama was a badass. You don't tell them the rest. They don't need to know the rest. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. You're completing the mission. There's a difference." Boyd pulled his goggles back on. "Now let's go kill some bad guys." The plan was simple. Boyd would create a distraction on the western approach, making noise and drawing fire. Cassidy would use the chaos to circle south, get into position to observe the compound, and identify where the package was going. Simple plans had a way of going wrong immediately. Boyd moved first, disappearing into the dust like a ghost. Cassidy counted to 30, then slipped out of the crack in the ridge, moving low and fast. Her rifle was slung across her back, useless in these conditions, and her pistol was in her hand. The wind hit her like a freight train, nearly knocking her off her feet. She stumbled, caught herself, pressed on. Visibility was less than 10 meters. She navigated by touch, keeping one hand on the rock face, moving by feel and memory. Then the shooting started. Boyd's rifle, distinctive 3-round bursts, disciplined and controlled. Return fire, wild automatic weapons fire, the sound of men shooting at shadows. Cassidy heard shouts in Arabic, confused and angry. She moved faster. The slope leveled out, and suddenly she was on the compound's southern perimeter. Through the swirling dust, she could make out the dark bulk of the crumbling fortress walls. Shapes moved in the murk, men with weapons, panicked and disoriented. Cassidy dropped into a crouch behind a fallen section of wall, pulling out her spotting scope. The dust made it nearly useless, but she could make out basic shapes. There, the white Land Cruiser, its engine running, headlights cutting feeble cones through the brown air. Men were loading something into the back. A metal case, maybe 3 feet long, 2 feet wide. Heavy from the way it took 2 men to lift it. That was the package. Boyd's rifle spoke again, closer this time. More return fire, increasingly desperate. Someone was screaming orders in Arabic. "Hold positions, find the shooter, don't let him." The transmission cut off in a burst of gunfire. Cassidy's heart clenched. She forced herself to focus. The Land Cruiser's doors slammed shut. It started moving, crawling through the compound at walking speed, headlights barely penetrating the dust. She had a choice: follow the vehicle and lose Boyd, or go back for Boyd and lose the package. Every fiber of her training, every instinct honed over 5 years of combat, screamed at her to go back. You didn't leave your teammates. You didn't abandon your brothers. That was the one unbreakable rule. But Boyd's voice echoed in her head. "You're completing the mission. There's a difference." Cassidy made her choice. She moved, shadowing the Land Cruiser as it crept through the compound. The driver was navigating by instinct, probably following a GPS waypoint. Cassidy stayed 20 meters back, using abandoned vehicles and rubble piles for cover. Behind her, the shooting stopped. The silence was worse than the gunfire. The Land Cruiser led Cassidy out of the compound and into open desert. She followed on foot, staying low, her world reduced to the twin red eyes of the vehicle's taillights in the dust. After 10 minutes, the vehicle stopped. Cassidy dropped flat, barely breathing. Through the brown murk, she heard voices, men conferring, debating, then a new sound, rotor blades, a helicopter. She couldn't see it, but she could hear it, circling low, probably using ground-penetrating radar to navigate. The rotor wash created a momentary clear spot in the dust, and Cassidy got a glimpse of what was happening. 3 men transferring the metal case from the Land Cruiser to a civilian helicopter. A Bell 407, no markings. Al-Sistani was there, supervising, his white shirt now stained brown with dust. And he was smiling. The package was loaded. The men climbed aboard. The helicopter's engine whined higher, preparing for takeoff. Cassidy raised her rifle. A futile gesture, but she had to try. Maybe she could disable the helicopter, force it down, salvage something from this disaster. Her finger found the trigger. And then she heard Boyd's voice on the radio. Not his real voice, a recording. His last words before he'd gone silent, played back on some kind of delay. Graves, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. Don't mourn, finish it. The package is rigged with a tracker. I slipped it on during our recon 3 days ago while you were setting up the hide. Frequency 773.5. Find it, kill it, make me proud. The transmission ended. Cassidy's hands were shaking. Boyd had known. He'd prepared for this. He'd set her up to succeed even if he failed. The old bastard. She lowered her rifle, pulled out her GPS tracker, dialed to frequency 773.5. A blip appeared on the screen, moving fast. The helicopter disappeared into the dust, its rotor noise fading. But Cassidy could still see it on her tracker. A little green dot heading northeast, into the heart of the storm. She keyed her radio, praying for a signal. Base, this is Overwatch 2. Overwatch 1 is down. Package is mobile, tracked and tagged. Requesting immediate air support on my position for extraction and pursuit. Static. More static. Then finally, Overwatch 2, base copies. Storm is degrading all communications. Say again, Overwatch 1 status? Cassidy closed her eyes. Overwatch 1 is KIA. I'm alone. A pause. Copy that, Overwatch 2. Stand by for extraction. ETA 90 minutes when weather clears. 90 minutes. The package would be long gone by then. Cassidy looked at the tracker, at the blip moving steadily northeast. Then she looked at the Land Cruiser, abandoned, engines still running. Boyd's voice echoed in her head. Finish it. Base, she said quietly. Overwatch 2 is going mobile. I'm pursuing the package. We'll update when I have a kill confirmation. Negative, Overwatch 2. You are ordered to hold position for extraction. Cassidy switched off the radio. She walked to the Land Cruiser, climbed into the driver's seat, and put it in gear. The storm swallowed her whole. The Land Cruiser's headlights were useless. 2 pale cones swallowed by infinite brown. Cassidy drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding the GPS tracker pressed against the dash, its green blip her only connection to sanity. The vehicle bucked over unseen terrain, suspension screaming. Sand hammered the windshield like shrapnel. The wipers fought a losing battle, smearing red mud across the glass. Cassidy's world had shrunk to 3 things: the tracker, the accelerator, and the voice in her head telling her this was suicide. She ignored the voice. The tracker showed the helicopter moving northeast at 80 knots, maintaining low altitude, probably 50 feet off the deck, using terrain-following radar to navigate. Smart. Any higher and the wind would flip it like a toy. Any lower and it'd plow into a dune. Cassidy checked her own heading. She was 20 kilometers behind and falling farther back with every minute. The Land Cruiser topped out at maybe 90 kilometers per hour on good road. In zero visibility over broken desert, she was doing 40 at best. The math was brutal and simple. She'd never catch them. But she didn't need to catch them. She just needed to stay close enough to see where they landed. A gust of wind hit the Land Cruiser broadside, nearly rolling it. Cassidy fought the wheel, felt the left tires leave the ground for a sickening moment, then slam back down. Her heart hammered. Sweat stung her eyes despite the air conditioning, which had stopped working 10 minutes ago, clogged with dust. The radio crackled with static, then a voice broke through. "Watch 2, this is Verwatch 6. Do you copy? Over." Cassidy grabbed the handset. "Overwatch 6, this is 2. Say again, you're breaking up. RMS indicating Keckage heading for ordinates November 7-3-6. I'm losing you. Repeat coordinates." The radio died completely, hissing white noise. Cassidy slammed the handset back into its cradle and focused on driving. The tracker was all that mattered now. The little green dot had slowed, descending, landing. She pushed the accelerator harder. The storm was thinning, not clearing, but the visibility had increased from 10 meters to maybe 30. Cassidy could see the terrain now, rolling dunes giving way to harder ground, patches of exposed bedrock jutting through the sand like bones. The GPS showed her closing the distance, 15 kilometers, 12, 10. The helicopter had stopped moving. Cassidy eased off the gas, scanning ahead. Through the brown murk, she could make out a dark shape, a mesa or plateau, maybe 50 meters high, its top shrouded in dust. The helicopter had to be up there, using the high ground as a landing zone. She checked her weapons. Her M4 rifle was on the passenger seat, covered in a plastic bag to keep the dust out. Her sidearm rode on her hip. 2 grenades on her vest. 4 magazines for the rifle, 3 for the pistol. It wasn't much for an assault, but she wasn't planning an assault. She was planning reconnaissance. Find out where the package was going. Call it in. Let the big boys with the air support handle the rest. Simple. Clean. Except nothing had been simple since the storm hit. Cassidy parked the Land Cruiser behind a rock formation, killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the moan of wind and the tick of cooling metal. She pulled off her dust-caked goggles, wiped her face with a shamag. Her reflection in the rearview mirror showed a stranger, eyes bloodshot, face streaked with red mud, lips cracked and bleeding. She looked like she'd been buried and dug back up. Maybe she had been. Cassidy grabbed her rifle, checked the chamber, worked the action. Smooth, no grit. The plastic bag had done its job. She slung the weapon, adjusted her vest, took 3 long pulls from her canteen. Then she stepped out into the storm and started climbing. The climb was 60 meters of hell. Cassidy moved from handhold to handhold, testing each grip before committing her weight. The rock was slick with dust, treacherous. Twice her boot slipped, sending her heart into her throat. Twice she caught herself, pressed flat against the stone, breathing hard. The wind tried to peel her off the cliff face like a sticker. It roared in her ears, drowning out thought. Her fingers ached, her shoulders burned, but she climbed. At 40 meters, she found a body. He'd been dead maybe an hour, sprawled across a narrow ledge. Cassidy recognized the uniform, private security contractor, probably former Spetsnaz from the equipment. A Vityaz submachine gun lay beside him, sand already half burying it. His throat had been cut, ear to ear, with professional efficiency. Cassidy searched him quickly. No ID, no radio, nothing useful except a half-empty magazine she pocketed. But the kill itself told a story. Al-Sistani was tying up loose ends. The hired muscle that had helped move the package was now a liability, which meant everyone who'd seen the transaction was on borrowed time, including her. Cassidy kept climbing. She reached the top of the mesa 20 minutes later, pulling herself over the rim and immediately rolling into cover behind a boulder. Her lungs screamed for air. She forced herself to breathe slowly, quietly, scanning her surroundings. The mesa top was maybe 200 meters across, relatively flat, with scattered rock formations providing cover. The helicopter sat in the center, rotors still turning slowly, the pilot keeping the engines warm for a quick departure. 2 men stood guard near the aircraft. Another 3 were carrying the metal case toward a vehicle. Not a car, but a military-grade truck, 6-wheeled, armored, Russian design, probably a Kamaz or Ural. And standing beside the truck, smoking a cigarette and looking utterly relaxed despite the storm, was Ahmad al-Sistani. Cassidy pulled out her camera, a military-grade unit with 50 times optical zoom and image stabilization. She raised it, centered al-Sistani in frame, and started shooting. The camera's shutter was silent, its memory card capturing evidence that could hang a dozen arms dealers. Al-Sistani finished his cigarette, flicked it away. He said something to one of his men, who laughed. Then he walked to the truck, climbed into the passenger seat. The case was loaded into the back, secured with straps. The guards mounted up. The truck's engine rumbled to life. Cassidy lowered the camera, her mind racing. The helicopter was leaving. She could hear the turbines spooling up. But the truck was staying, which meant there was a road. A way off this mesa that didn't involve flying through a Haboob, which meant she could follow. She started moving, circling around the perimeter of the mesa, looking for the road. The storm provided cover, but made navigation nearly impossible. She moved by compass bearing, checking her position every 50 meters. That's when she heard the voices. Cassidy froze, pressed flat behind a rock. 2 men, speaking in Arabic, their voices carried on the wind. They were close, maybe 20 meters away, and moving in her direction. A patrol, looking for exactly what al-Sistani had found on the cliff. Loose ends. Cassidy's hand moved to her knife. She couldn't risk gunfire. The sound would bring everyone running. But a knife was quiet, intimate, final. The voices grew louder. She could see them now, 2 shapes in the dust, AK-47s held ready. They were sweeping methodically, professionals doing their job. One of them stopped, said something. The other laughed, replied. They were 10 meters away. 5. Cassidy waited, every muscle coiled. The first man walked past her position, close enough that she could smell his sweat. His partner followed, rifle up, alert. They passed. Cassidy let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Then she heard the second man stop, turn back. He'd seen something. A footprint maybe, or a disturbance in the dust. He raised his rifle, scanning. Cassidy moved. She came out of cover like a ghost, closing the distance in 3 strides. Her left hand clamped over the man's mouth before he could shout. Her right hand drove the knife up under his ribs, angling for the heart, the way Boyd had taught her in close-quarters combat drills. The man stiffened, tried to struggle. Cassidy held him, feeling his life drain away in hot pulses against her hand. It took 15 seconds. It felt like 15 years. She lowered him to the ground silently. The first man was calling back, asking a question in Arabic. When no answer came, his voice sharpened with suspicion. Cassidy picked up the dead man's AK-47, checked the safety was off, and waited. The first man appeared around the rock, rifle raised, and Cassidy shot him twice in the chest. The suppressor on the AK, she hadn't noticed it before, reduced the sound to a sharp cough, barely audible over the wind. He went down hard. Cassidy swept both bodies for intel. Radio encrypted, phones locked. But on the second man, she found a map, hand-drawn, showing a route from the mesa down to a valley floor, then north along a wadi to a marked position. Safe house, 47 kilometers. 47 kilometers to wherever al-Sistani was taking the package. Cassidy folded the map, tucked it into her vest, and started moving again. Behind her, the helicopter lifted off, its rotor noise fading into the storm. She was alone on a hostile mesa, surrounded by killers, with no backup and no extraction. But she had a map, and she had a mission. The road down the mesa was a nightmare of switchbacks carved into crumbling stone. Cassidy descended on foot, keeping to the shadows, her rifle ready. Every 50 meters she'd stop, listen, scan for movement. The storm was finally breaking. Visibility had increased to maybe 100 meters, and through gaps in the dust, she could see stars. The wind was dropping from hurricane force to merely miserable, which meant she was running out of cover. Halfway down, she heard engines. Cassidy pressed herself into a shallow depression in the rock face, making herself as small as possible. The sound grew louder, multiple vehicles moving fast. She risked a glance. 3 technicals, mounted with heavy machine guns, racing up the road toward the mesa top. Reinforcements, probably responding to the dead patrol. The lead vehicle passed within 20 meters of her position, close enough that she could see the driver's face, tense and focused. Then they were gone, climbing higher, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Cassidy waited 2 minutes, then kept moving. She reached the valley floor as the last of the storm dissipated. The sky overhead was clear now, stars blazing with desert intensity. The air was cold, desert nights always were, and her breath steamed. The map showed the wadi heading north. Cassidy oriented herself by the stars, Polaris visible in the northern horizon, and started walking. She'd covered maybe 3 kilometers when she heard the helicopter returning. Cassidy dove for cover as the aircraft roared overhead, heading back toward the mesa. Searchlights stabbed down, sweeping the terrain. They'd found the bodies. Now they were hunting. She needed transportation. As if answering her prayer, she saw headlights in the distance, moving along the wadi floor. A single vehicle, heading north, away from the mesa. Cassidy checked her rifle, then started jogging, angling to intercept. The vehicle was a civilian pickup truck, ancient Toyota Hilux, held together with rust and optimism. One occupant, an old man, probably a local herder displaced by the storm. Wrong place, wrong time. Cassidy stepped into the road 30 meters ahead, rifle raised. The truck's headlights pinned her like an insect. Brakes squealed. The vehicle slewed sideways, stopped. The old man stared at her through the windshield, eyes wide with terror. Cassidy approached the driver's side, weapon ready, mind running through Arabic phrases. "Out," she said in heavily accented Arabic. "Get out, now." The old man didn't move, paralyzed by fear. Cassidy softened her tone. "I won't hurt you. I need your truck. Emergency. Please." The old man's hands were shaking on the wheel. He said something in a dialect Cassidy didn't understand, then slowly opened the door and climbed out. He was maybe 70, thin as wire, wearing traditional robes caked with dust. Cassidy gestured at the road behind them. "Walk that way. Don't look back. You didn't see me." The old man nodded, still terrified, and started walking. Cassidy climbed into the truck, shifted into gear, and pressed the accelerator. The engine wheezed, but ran. The fuel gauge showed half a tank. Good enough. She drove north, following the wadi, checking the map every few minutes against her GPS. 47 kilometers to the safe house. At the truck's maximum speed, maybe 60 kilometers per hour on this terrain, she'd arrive in about an hour, if she wasn't intercepted first. Behind her, she could see lights on the mesa, vehicles searching, men angry. She'd killed 2 of theirs and disappeared into the storm like a ghost. They'd be looking for her with professional fury. But the storm had given her a head start, and in this country, a head start was sometimes all you needed. Cassidy pushed the truck harder, racing against time and dawn. The ambush came at kilometer 32. Cassidy saw the burning technical before she registered the danger. A wreck blocking the road, flames licking at the night sky. She slammed the brakes, the Hilux fishtailing to a stop. Too late, she realized her mistake. Muzzle flashes erupted from both sides of the wadi. Bullets punched through the truck's thin metal skin, spiderwebbing the windshield. Cassidy threw herself across the seats as rounds snapped overhead, the interior filling with pulverized safety glass. She kicked open the passenger door, rolled out into the sand, came up running. More gunfire tracking her movement. She sprinted for cover, a cluster of boulders 20 meters away, as bullets kicked up geysers of sand around her boots. Her lungs burned, her legs pumped. She dove behind the rocks as a burst of automatic fire chewed into the stone above her head, showering her with chips. Cassidy pressed her back against the boulder, chest heaving, mind racing. She was pinned down by at least 4 shooters, probably more. They had the high ground, overlapping fields of fire, and all the ammunition in the world. She had 1 rifle, 4 magazines, and darkness. Not exactly favorable odds. But Boyd had taught her a long time ago, when you can't win a fair fight, cheat. Cassidy pulled a fragmentation grenade from her vest, yanked the pin, and threw it high and hard toward the southern ridgeline. She didn't wait to see where it landed. She was already moving, scrambling along the base of the rocks, changing position. The grenade detonated with a flat crack. Shouts of surprise. The gunfire shifted, focusing on where she'd been. Cassidy brought her rifle up, found a target, a man silhouetted against the stars on the northern ridge, and squeezed the trigger. The M4 bucked. The man dropped. She shifted aim, fired again. Another target down. Return fire intensified, rounds screaming past her head. But she was moving again, flowing from cover to cover like water, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. This was the Ghost War, Boyd's term for fighting at night against superior numbers. You became smoke. You became shadows. You struck and vanished before the enemy could respond. Cassidy circled wide, flanking the southern position. She could hear them now, shouting coordinates, trying to vector in on her last known position. They were good, disciplined, but they were also confused. They'd expected to ambush a vehicle, not a trained American sniper who fought like a demon. She found the southern team, 3 men behind sandbags, scanning the wrong direction. Cassidy dropped prone, sighted carefully, and fired. 1 down. The other 2 spun, weapons tracking. Cassidy fired twice more. They fell. The northern team realized what was happening and shifted fire toward her new position. Cassidy was already moving, running low, using the terrain. She reached the dead southern team's position, grabbed one of their AK-47s, more reliable than her M4 in sand, and kept moving. 10 minutes later, the ambush site was silent except for the crackle of burning wreckage. Cassidy did a quick battlefield assessment. 7 hostiles down. She'd taken a graze across her left forearm, barely noticed it in the adrenaline rush, and her uniform was torn in 3 places. But she was mobile, functional. The truck was a total loss, riddled with bullets. She checked the dead men for anything useful, found water, ammunition, and another radio. This one was on, voices chattering in Arabic, status checks, position reports. Then a new voice, cold and precise, speaking English with a slight French accent. Ghost 3, this is Control. Acknowledge. Silence. Ghost 3, respond immediately or we terminate radio protocol. Cassidy stared at the radio, then keyed the mic. In the best Arabic accent she could manage, rough and panicked. Control, this is Ghost 3. We are under attack. I am the only survivor. Requesting immediate backup. Ghost 3, verify authentication code. Cassidy hung up the radio, smashed it under her boot heel, and kept walking north. Behind her, she could hear vehicles approaching, drawn by the sound of gunfire. But she had a 15-minute head start, and in the dark, that was enough. She merged into the night like smoke. Cassidy walked through a graveyard of her own making, 7 bodies cooling in the sand behind her. 7 men who'd woken up this morning expecting to go home tonight. She told herself they were enemy combatants, that they'd have killed her without hesitation, that this was war and war had rules, and she'd followed them. The rationalizations felt hollow. She found a depression in the wadi wall, barely a cave, more like a wind-carved dimple in the stone, and collapsed into it. Her hands were shaking, not from fear or adrenaline crash, but from something deeper, something that had been building since she'd watched Boyd walk into enemy fire. The tremors started in her fingers, spread up her arms, into her chest. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Panic attack. She recognized the symptoms from the psych briefs, from the mandatory resiliency training they'd all sat through and mostly ignored. 4 counts, she whispered to herself. In through the nose. She tried, got maybe 2 counts before her lungs seized up, before the air turned to concrete in her throat. Boyd's voice, clear as day. You're losing it, Graves. I know, she said out loud. Can't lose it out here. Lose it, you die. I know. Then get your shit together, soldier. Cassidy pressed her palms against her eyes, hard enough to see stars. When she opened them, Boyd was sitting across from her in the cave. Not translucent, not ghost-like. Solid, real, his weathered face creased with concern. You're not real, she told him. Real enough, Boyd said. He pulled out his Bible, thumbed through it absently. Question is, you gonna sit here having a breakdown, or you gonna finish what we started? We didn't start anything. You're dead. I watched you. Her voice cracked. I heard your last transmission and I left you there. I drove away and let you die alone. I wasn't alone, Boyd tapped the Bible, and I made my choice. Gave you yours. You think I'd want you throwing that away because you got sad? It's not about being sad. Then what's it about? Cassidy stared at him, at the hallucination, at the ghost, at whatever her heat-exhausted brain had conjured. I'm scared. I'm so goddamn scared and I don't know how to stop being scared. Boyd smiled, the same sad smile he'd given her 100 times during training. You don't stop being scared. You just keep moving anyway. Fear means you're still alive, still care about staying that way. Day you stop being scared is the day you're already dead. That's not helpful. Wasn't meant to be helpful. Was meant to be true. Boyd stood, or seemed to, and offered his hand. Come on, Staff Sergeant. Mission ain't done yet. Cassidy looked at the hand, looked at Boyd's face. Then she closed her eyes, counted to 10, and opened them again. Boyd was gone, but her hands had stopped shaking. She pulled out her canteen, took 3 careful sips, and checked her map. 32 kilometers to go. She could walk that. Had walked farther in worse conditions during Hell Week. Cassidy stood, shouldered her rifle, and started walking north. Behind her, something moved in the darkness. They'd been tracking her for 3 kilometers before she noticed. The first sign was boot prints in the sand, too fresh to be from the ambush. Then tire tracks, a single vehicle moving parallel to her route, staying just out of sight beyond the wadi's edge. They were herding her. Cassidy stopped, scanned the terrain. The wadi stretched ahead for maybe 2 kilometers before opening into a broader valley. Perfect ambush terrain, compressed approach, limited cover, easy fields of fire. If she kept walking, she'd be walking into a kill zone. So she stopped walking. Instead, she climbed. The wadi's western wall was steep but manageable, loose scree and jutting rock. Her boots slipped twice, sending cascades of small stones rattling down. Each sound made her wince, might as well be ringing a dinner bell. But she reached the top, pulled herself over the rim, and found herself on a broad plateau of hardpan and scattered boulders. And there, 300 meters away, was the vehicle she'd heard. A technical, parked behind a low rise, its bed-mounted machine gun pointed down into the wadi, waiting for her. Cassidy counted heads. Driver, gunner, 2 more in the back. 4 men total. The gunner was scanning the wadi floor through binoculars, searching for movement that wouldn't come. She could leave, circle around, avoid contact, keep moving north. But they had a vehicle. She was on foot. Eventually, they'd realize she wasn't in the wadi and start searching the plateau. And out here, in open terrain, a technical would run her down in minutes. Better to deal with the problem now, on her terms. Cassidy checked her AK-47, 30 rounds in the magazine, one in the chamber. She'd taken it from the ambush site, preferred it over her M4 for reliability in dust. The iron sights were crude but functional. She moved into position, using the boulders for cover, closing to 200 meters. The wind was in her face, blowing from them to her. Good for scent, good for sound. At 150 meters, she stopped, found a stable shooting position, and sighted on the gunner. Exhale halfway. Find the pause. Squeeze. The AK barked, bucking hard against her shoulder. The gunner jerked, dropped his binoculars, and slumped over the machine gun. The other three scattered like roaches, shouting, diving for cover. Return fire came immediately. Wild shots, no clear target, just suppressive fire while they figured out where the threat was. Cassidy shifted position, moved 20 meters left, found new cover. One of the men was running for the machine gun, trying to man it. She shot him twice. He fell. 2 left. But they'd found her range now, and bullets were smacking into the rocks around her position, forcing her to keep her head down. She heard an engine rev. The technical was moving, maneuvering to get a better angle. Cassidy rolled right, came up behind a different boulder, and saw one of the remaining men in the open, sprinting for better cover. She led him by 2 feet, fired. He went down hard. The technical's engine roared louder. It was coming around the rise, trying to flank her position. Cassidy ran. She sprinted across the plateau, angling away from the vehicle, using every bit of cover she could find. Behind her, the machine gun opened up, that distinctive, heavy thump, thump, thump of a 50 cal. Rounds the size of her thumb cracked past her head, exploding against rocks. She dove behind a larger boulder formation, gasping. The technical was circling, trying to cut her off from escape routes. 1 enemy left, plus the driver, and that machine gun. Cassidy pulled her last grenade, a smoke grenade, useless for killing, but perfect for confusion. She yanked the pin, tossed it toward the technical, and waited. Purple smoke billowed out, thick and fast, engulfing the vehicle. The machine gun went silent. The gunner couldn't see to shoot. Cassidy moved, closing the distance, using the smoke as cover. She could hear coughing, cursing in Arabic. The technical's engine was idling, disoriented. She emerged from the smoke 10 meters from the vehicle's driver's side, raised the AK, and fired through the window. The engine died. The last man, the one who'd been on the gun, jumped down from the bed, rifle raised. But Cassidy was already moving, closing to knife range, inside his weapon's effective arc. Her blade came up in a brutal, ascending slash, catching him under the jaw. He gurgled, dropped. Cassidy stood in the purple smoke, breathing hard, covered in other people's blood. 4 more bodies, 11 total today. She was losing count, losing track of what made her different from the people she was killing. But she was still alive, and they weren't. And in this place, that was the only math that mattered. She searched the technical, found water, 3 bottles, full, food, Lebanese flatbread and canned meat, and gasoline, half a tank. The vehicle was hers now. Cassidy climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove north. The sun was starting to rise, painting the desert pink and gold. It would have been beautiful if she hadn't been covered in blood. The technical broke down at kilometer 38. One moment it was running rough but functional. The next, a grinding sound from the transmission, a lurch, and the engine died. Cassidy tried the starter. Nothing but a clicking sound and the smell of burning oil. She slammed her fist against the steering wheel, once, twice, 3 times. Then she rested her forehead against it and laughed. a broken, hysterical sound that scared her more than the combat had. She was 9 kilometers from the target, 9 kilometers with no vehicle, no water. She drunk the last bottle an hour ago, in a sun that was climbing toward full morning heat. And behind her, somewhere, more of al-Sistani's men were coming. They had to be. You didn't lose 11 men without launching a full-scale manhunt. Cassidy grabbed her rifle, her remaining ammunition, and started walking. The sun climbed higher. Her canteen mocked her with its emptiness. She shook it, heard nothing, threw it away in disgust. Dehydration was setting in. She could feel it in her thick tongue, her pounding headache, the way her thoughts were getting slower, fuzzier. At kilometer 39, she started seeing things again. Boyd, walking beside her. Not talking this time, just keeping pace, his rifle slung the way he always carried it. "You're not real," she told him. He didn't answer. At kilometer 40, the mirages started. Pools of water on the horizon, shimmering and perfect. She knew they weren't real. Walked toward them anyway, some animal part of her brain convinced that maybe, just maybe, this one would be different. It never was. At kilometer 41, she fell. Just stumbled over nothing, her legs giving out, and went down face first in the sand. She lay there for a while, seconds, minutes, staring at individual grains of sand inches from her eyes. They were beautiful, she realized. Tiny crystals of quartz and feldspar, each one unique, each one a small piece of geology's long story. She was losing her mind. Boyd's hand appeared in her vision, offering to pull her up. She reached for it. Her fingers closed on empty air. "Get up, Graves," Boyd said. His voice was distant, like he was calling from another room. "You don't get to quit. Not after everything." "Can't," she whispered. "Can't isn't in your vocabulary. You're Texas tough, remember?" "So tired." "I know, but 9 more kilometers, that's all. 9 kilometers and you're there. You can walk 9 kilometers. "Can I?" "You already have. In basic, you walk 25 clicks with a full ruck. This is nothing. You're stronger than this." Cassidy closed her eyes, felt the sun pressing down on her like a physical weight. Maybe she'd just stay here. Let the desert take her. Join Boyd in whatever came next. But then she thought about the package, about the dirty bomb, about thousands of people in some city somewhere who had no idea how close they'd come to dying, and how she was the only thing standing between them and that death. She thought about Boyd, who'd given everything so she could finish this mission. She thought about West Texas and her father's cattle ranch and the way the sky looked during a thunderstorm when lightning jumped from cloud to cloud. She thought about going home. Cassidy put her hands flat on the sand, pushed herself up. Her vision swam. Her legs shook. But she stood. 9 kilometers, she said out loud. Boyd smiled, or maybe she imagined it. "That's my girl." She started walking again, one foot in front of the other. Cassidy's radio crackled to life at kilometer 43. She'd forgotten she even had it, the unit taken from the ambush site, tucked into her vest, battery slowly dying. Now it hissed with static, then voices, speaking English with American accents. Reaper 3-1 holding at Angels 20, no visual on Overwatch 2. "Copy that, Reaper. Based to all call signs, we have lost contact with Overwatch 2 for 6 hours. Last known position was grid November 7. Cassidy's hands fumbled for the radio, nearly dropped it. She keyed the mic with trembling fingers. Base, this is Overwatch 2. How copy?" Static. "Base, this is Staff Sergeant Graves. I am mobile and pursuing the package. Request immediate support. Grid November 73482. More static, then a different voice, younger, excited. "Overwatch 2, this is Warhorse 6. We copy you weak and distorted. Say again your status." "Warhorse 6, I am..." Cassidy's voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. "I am mobile on foot. dehydrated, minor injuries, no ammunition except sidearm. Package is at target location, grid November 73482. I have visual confirmation, requesting immediate strike authorization. A pause. Then, Overwatch 2, stand by for higher authority. Warhorse, I don't have time to. Stand by, Overwatch 2. Cassidy kept walking, the radio pressed to her ear, listening to silence punctuated by bursts of static. Every second felt like an hour. Every step took all her remaining strength. Finally, a new voice. Older. Authority in every syllable. Overwatch 2, this is Thunder Actual. We have your position. Reaper 3-1 is repositioning for visual confirmation. Do you have eyes on the package? Affirmative, Thunder Actual. Package is inside compound. Grid November 73482. Observe target Principal Ahmad al-Sistani on site with security element. Estimate 8 to 10 hostiles. Copy that. Reaper is 2 minutes out from visual. Once we have drone confirmation, we'll prosecute the target. Your mission is complete, Sergeant Graves. Find cover and stay down. Something in Cassidy rebelled at that. After everything, after Boyd, after the storm, after 11 bodies and 9 kilometers of hell, they wanted her to just sit down and wait. Thunder Actual, negative. I'm going in for close reconnaissance. I need to confirm the package hasn't been moved before you drop ordnance. Overwatch 2, you are ordered to stand down and await extraction. We have this. Sir, with respect, you don't have eyes on target. I do. If al-Sistani moves that package before Reaper gets visual, we lose him. We lose everything Boyd died for. A longer pause this time. Cassidy could almost hear the calculation happening. Mission success versus operator safety, the cold math of war. Overwatch 2, your call, but if you go in, we can't provide immediate support. Reaper's ordnance is danger close to your position. If things go bad, you're on your own until we can get ground assets to you. Understood, sir. Going dark. Overwatch 2 out. Cassidy switched off the radio before Thunder Actual could countermand the order. She was done taking orders. This was personal now. By kilometer 47, Cassidy was a ghost wearing human skin. She'd been moving for 8 hours straight, driving, fighting, walking, with no food except half an MRE and no sleep for 38 hours. Her body was shutting down in stages. The fine motor control was long gone. Now came the deeper failures, her vision tunneling, her thoughts looping, her sense of time fracturing. The safe house appeared exactly where the map indicated, a compound built into a hillside, adobe walls and corrugated metal roof, surrounded by razor wire. 2 vehicles outside, the armored truck from the Mesa and a black Mercedes sedan. Lights burned in the windows. Cassidy found an observation position on a rocky outcrop 300 meters away, pulled out her camera, and started documenting. She photographed the vehicles, the compound layout, the guards walking the perimeter, 6 men visible, probably more inside. And in an upper window, she saw al-Sistani talking on a satellite phone, gesturing emphatically, making deals, moving product, getting rich while the world burned. Cassidy's finger tightened on the camera's shutter release, wishing it were a trigger instead. She spent 2 hours watching, learning the pattern. Guard rotation every 30 minutes. 1 man on the roof with a rifle. 2 patrolling the perimeter. The rest inside, probably sleeping or eating. The package, the metal case, was visible through a ground floor window, sitting on a table, surrounded by men inspecting it. Verification. The buyers wanted to confirm they were getting what they paid for, which meant they'd be opening it soon, which meant this was her chance. Cassidy checked her remaining ammunition. 1 magazine for the M4, 2 for the pistol. Not enough for an assault. Barely enough for a fighting retreat, but maybe, just maybe, enough for sabotage. Boyd's voice echoed in her head, real this time, a memory from training. Can't kill them all? Kill the mission instead. Destroy the package. You destroy their reason for fighting. Cassidy smiled grimly and started planning. The approach took an hour. Cassidy moved like a snake through the scrub brush, low and slow, testing each hand and foot placement before committing weight. The guards were professionals, but they weren't expecting trouble. This deep in hostile territory, they thought they were safe. They were wrong. She reached the perimeter wire at 0303 a.m., when human alertness is at its lowest. The wire was standard commercial razor wire, nasty but cuttable. She used her multi-tool to snip a hole, folded the wire back carefully, and slipped through. Inside the compound now, no turning back. Cassidy circled toward the building's blind side. The eastern wall had no windows, only a rusted ventilation grate. She pried it open with her knife, peered inside. Darkness, the smell of dust and old concrete. She squeezed through, dropping into what looked like a storage room. Boxes of supplies stacked haphazardly. A door leading deeper into the compound. Cassidy checked her rifle, still 4 rounds in the magazine, and advanced. The hallway beyond was lit by bare bulbs, casting harsh shadows. Voices drifted from the main room. Men talking, the clink of glass. She could smell cigarette smoke, strong tea. She moved toward the sound, hugging the wall. At the doorway to the main room, she stopped and risked a glance. 6 men inside, 4 sitting at a table, playing cards. 1 standing by the window, watching the desert. The 6th, a thin man in glasses, was working on the metal case, tools spread around him. And there, on the table beside the case, was the package itself. A cylindrical device, maybe a meter long, covered in Cyrillic markings. A dirty bomb, just like Intel had said. The thin man was running a Geiger counter over it, checking radiation levels. Cassidy's mind raced. She couldn't fight 6 men with 4 bullets, but she didn't need to fight them. She needed to destroy the device, and for that, she needed fire. She backed away silently, retracing her steps to the storage room, searched through the boxes, found canned food, bottled water, cleaning supplies, and gasoline. 2 jerry cans full. Cassidy smiled without humor. She unscrewed the cap on 1 jerry can, found a rag in the corner, stuffed it halfway into the opening. An improvised Molotov cocktail. Simple, effective, devastating. She carried it back toward the main room, heart hammering. At the doorway, she pulled out her lighter, a battered Zippo that had been through 4 deployments, and flicked it open. The flame was tiny, barely visible, but it was enough. Cassidy lit the rag, counted to 3, and threw the jerry can into the room. The world became fire. The jerry can hit the floor, ruptured, and gasoline spread in a flaming wave. The men at the table had maybe 2 seconds to register what was happening before the fire reached them. Screaming, shouting, men diving for cover, beating at flames on their clothes. Cassidy was already moving, sprinting down the hallway toward the building's exit. Behind her, she heard gunfire, wild, panicked shots as the men tried to fight fire and intruder simultaneously. An explosion, the second jerry can must have ignited. The concussion knocked Cassidy off her feet, slammed her into the wall. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but training overrode pain, and she forced herself up, kept running. She hit the exterior door at full sprint, burst into the night air. Alarms were screaming. The roof guard was shouting into a radio, pointing at the flames billowing from the building. Cassidy raised her rifle, fired once. The guard dropped. She ran for the perimeter, legs pumping, lungs burning. Behind her, the compound was chaos. Men pouring out of the burning building, some on fire, all screaming. The razor wire loomed ahead. Cassidy didn't slow, didn't hesitate. She threw herself at the gap she'd cut earlier, felt barbs tear her uniform, scratch her skin, and then she was through, rolling, coming up running. Gunfire erupted behind her, muzzle flashes in the dark. Bullets snapped past her head, kicked up sand at her feet. She zigzagged, making herself a harder target, putting distance between her and the compound. 200 meters, 300, 400. The shooting stopped. She was out of effective range. Cassidy dove behind a dune, gasping, and looked back. The compound was fully engulfed, flames reaching 30 feet into the night sky. Black smoke boiled upward. She could still hear screaming, could see figures silhouetted against the fire. And in the center of the inferno, where the main room had been, a secondary explosion, smaller, sharper. The package, the dirty bomb. Its conventional explosive core had detonated, scattering radioactive material across the compound. Mission accomplished. Except now she had 6 magazines of ammunition hunting her, and no way home. Cassidy ran north for an hour before her body gave out. She collapsed behind a rock formation, chest heaving, vision swimming. Her canteen was empty. Her ammunition was gone. She dropped the rifle somewhere during the escape, kept only her pistol. Her left arm was bleeding steadily from multiple cuts. She was done. Behind her she could see lights, vehicles searching, methodical and thorough. They'd find her eventually. It was only a matter of time. Cassidy pulled out her radio, the one she'd taken from the ambush site, still functional, and keyed it to the emergency frequency. Any U.S. forces, this is Staff Sergeant Cassidy Graves, call sign Overwatch 2. I am approximately 48 kilometers northeast of Checkpoint Delta. Mission accomplished, package destroyed, requesting immediate extraction. I am wounded, no ammunition, and being pursued by hostile forces. If anyone can hear this, I need help. Over. Static. She tried again. Any station, this is Overwatch 2. Does anyone copy? Over. More static. Then faint and broken. Watch 2. This is Ron Actual. We copy. Extraction. 20 men. Hold. The signal died. Cassidy didn't know if they'd heard her. Didn't know if help was coming, but she'd done what she came to do. The package was destroyed. Al-Sistani's network was in chaos. Thousands of lives saved. Boyd would have been proud. She closed her eyes, feeling the cold desert night seep into her bones. If this was where it ended, at least she'd gone down fighting. At least she'd finished the mission. Cassidy's hand found the worn groove in her pistol grip, the same nervous habit, now stained with blood, and waited. The lights grew closer, and then, in the distance, she heard a new sound. Rotor blades, coming fast. The compound was a fortress, but every fortress had a weak point. Cassidy circled the perimeter for the 3rd time, memorizing guard rotations, counting blind spots, calculating angles. The sun was fully up now, temperature climbing toward another brutal day. Her shadow stretched long across the sand, a dark twin that moved when she moved. She'd been observing for 90 minutes. The pattern was clear. 6 guards total, rotating in pairs every 30 minutes. 1 always on the roof with a scoped rifle. 2 patrolling the perimeter. 3 inside with the package and Al-Sistani. The weak point was the eastern wall, the same approach she'd used before. No windows, minimal coverage from the roof position. But this time there'd be no second jerry can, no fire to create chaos. This time, she'd have to be the chaos herself. Cassidy checked her gear one final time. Pistol, 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Knife, 6 inches of carbon steel, edge sharp enough to shave with. 1 smoke grenade, and the camera around her neck, still recording, still gathering evidence. No armor, no backup, no second chances. She pulled the smoke grenade, yanked the pin, and threw it toward the compound's western side, away from her approach, drawing attention in the wrong direction. Purple smoke billowed up, thick and fast. Shouts from inside the compound. The roof guard swiveled his rifle toward the smoke. The perimeter guards converged, weapons ready. Cassidy ran. She covered the 200 meters in 30 seconds, boots pounding sand, lungs screaming. The eastern wall loomed up, and she hit it at full speed, using momentum to carry her up and over the razor wire in one fluid motion. Barbs tore her uniform, gouged her shoulder, but she was through, landing in a crouch on the other side. Inside the compound now, the same ventilation grate from before, she'd left it loose during her escape. It pulled open easily, and she squeezed through into the storage room, pistol up, scanning corners. Empty. Voices echoed from the main room, angry and confused. The smoke grenade had done its job. They thought they were under attack from the west. By the time they realized the truth, it would be too late. Cassidy moved through the corridor like a wraith, each step calculated, each breath controlled. The hallway opened into the main room, and she pressed herself against the wall, listening. Al-Sistani's voice, speaking in Arabic. Smokescreen, nothing more. Probably local rebels testing our response. The package is secure. We proceed as planned. Another voice, European accent. The buyer arrives in 1 hour. If there's any threat... There is no threat, Al-Sistani interrupted. We control this territory. No one would dare. Cassidy stepped into the doorway, pistol raised. 6 faces turned toward her. For one frozen moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Cassidy smiled, cold, predatory, the smile of someone who'd walked through hell and come out the other side with nothing left to lose. Surprise, she said. The first man reached for his weapon. Cassidy shot him twice, center mass. He went down. The room exploded into chaos. She moved, flowing sideways, putting the metal case between her and the remaining shooters. Bullets punched through the adobe walls, filling the air with dust. She returned fire, methodical and precise. One shot, one target, economy of violence. Second man down. Third man charging, knife in hand. Cassidy ducked his slash, drove her own blade up under his ribs, used his momentum to throw him past her. He crashed into a table, didn't get up. Fourth man, she recognized him from the mesa, one of Al-Sistani's personal guards, had found cover behind an overturned cabinet. He was firing blind, spraying rounds in her general direction. Cassidy dropped prone, sighted under the cabinet's legs, and shot him through the ankle. He screamed, fell. She finished it with a headshot. Slide lock, empty magazine. She rolled behind the metal case, ejected the spent mag, slammed in her last one. 15 rounds. 2 hostiles left, Al-Sistani and the European buyer. You can't win, Al-Sistani shouted from somewhere behind an interior wall. My men are coming. You're surrounded. Cassidy didn't waste breath responding. She scanned the room, mapping positions by sound. Al-Sistani was in the back corner, probably behind the heavy desk. The European was... where? Movement, peripheral vision. She spun, fired. The European stumbled out from behind a support column, clutching his shoulder, pistol falling from nerveless fingers. He looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. Please, he said in accented English. I am only... Cassidy shot him in the chest. He fell. Only what? She asked the corpse. Only buying a weapon that would have killed thousands? Only financing terrorism? No answer. Dead men didn't argue. She heard footsteps outside, the guards, finally figuring out the real threat wasn't to the west. They'd breach any second and she'd be trapped in this room with no ammunition and no exit. Unless she made her own exit. Cassidy grabbed the metal case, heavier than she'd expected, maybe 60 pounds, and ran for the window. Didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. She hit the glass at full speed, shoulder first, and the world became a kaleidoscope of breaking glass in bright sunlight. She landed hard in the courtyard, rolled, came up running with the case clutched against her chest. Behind her, Al-Sistani's voice, screaming orders. Kill her! Kill her now! Gunfire erupted. Bullets cracked past her head, kicked up geysers of sand. Cassidy zigzagged, making herself a harder target, heading for the compound's main gate. It was closed, locked. No time to pick it. She set down the case, pulled out her last grenade. No, wait. She'd used the smoke grenade already. What did she have left? Nothing. She had nothing. Cassidy laughed, a wild, slightly unhinged sound, and did the only thing left to do. She turned and faced her pursuers. 3 men emerged from the building, weapons raised. Al-Sistani behind them, face twisted with rage. Cassidy stood in the open courtyard, the metal case at her feet, her empty pistol pointed at the ground. The morning sun cast her shadow long across the sand. "You killed my men," Al-Sistani said, walking forward slowly. "Destroyed my operation, cost me millions. For what? Some misguided sense of duty?" "For Boyd," Cassidy said quietly, "and for everyone you were planning to kill with that device." Al-Sistani glanced at the case, then back at her. "You think you've won? You think destroying one dirty bomb will stop anything?" He laughed. "There are 10 more where that came from. 20. 100. You saved no one. You accomplished nothing." "Maybe," Cassidy said, "but I saved today. And sometimes today is all you get." Al-Sistani raised his hand, about to give the order to fire. And then the sky opened up. The Hellfire missile hit the armored truck first. The explosion was a physical wall of pressure and heat, lifting Cassidy off her feet and slamming her into the compound wall. Her ears rang, her vision whited out. When she could see again, the truck was a blazing crater, pieces of metal scattered across 50 meters. The second missile hit the Mercedes. The third and fourth hit the building itself, turning adobe and concrete into flying shrapnel. Cassidy covered the metal case with her body as debris rained down, chunks of masonry and twisted metal and things she didn't want to identify. The world was fire and smoke and the screaming of dying men. When the explosions finally stopped, she lifted her head cautiously. The compound was gone. Just gone. Reduced to rubble and flames. Bodies everywhere, or what was left of them. Al-Sistani's final empire scattered across the desert floor. She searched for Al-Sistani himself, found him 20 meters away, crawling through the sand, his legs shattered by shrapnel. He was leaving a trail of blood, dragging himself toward nothing, going nowhere. Cassidy stood, every muscle screaming protest. She walked over to him, knelt down so he could see her face. "You were wrong," she said. "I did accomplish something. I made sure you'd never hurt anyone again." Al-Sistani tried to speak, managed only a wet gurgle. Cassidy stood, turned away, and didn't look back. The sound of rotor blades grew louder. She looked up, saw a Black Hawk descending, kicking up a dust storm with its downwash. The door gunner was tracking her with his weapon until someone inside, an officer probably, waved him off. The helicopter landed 50 meters away. A squad of soldiers poured out, weapons ready, securing the perimeter. An older man in a major's uniform walked toward her, moving with the careful confidence of someone used to command. He stopped 3 feet away, took in her appearance, the torn uniform, the blood, the 1,000-yard stare. "Staff Sergeant Graves?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "I'm Major Hendricks, 5th Special Forces Group. Hell of a thing you did here." He looked at the metal case. "That what I think it is?" "Yes, sir. Dirty bomb. Needs to be handled by EOD. We'll take care of it." Hendricks gestured to 2 of his men, who carefully lifted the case and carried it toward the helicopter. Then he looked back at Cassidy. "Your command said you went dark. Disobeyed a direct order to stand down." Cassidy met his eyes. "Yes, sir." "Probably saved a few thousand lives doing it." Hendricks smiled slightly. "We'll figure out the paperwork later. Right now, let's get you home." "Home," Cassidy repeated. The word felt foreign, like something from another language. "Can you walk?" She tested her legs. They held. Barely. "Yes, sir." "Then let's move. We've got medical standing by, hot food, and a debrief that can wait until you've slept for about 20 hours. Cassidy followed him toward the Black Hawk. As she walked, she scanned the rubble one more time, looking for survivors. There were none. She climbed into the helicopter, strapped in, and closed her eyes as it lifted off. Through the open door, she could see the compound shrinking below, becoming just another scar on the desert floor, another graveyard in a land of ghosts. The Black Hawk's interior smelled like JP-8 fuel and old sweat. Cassidy sat with her back against the bulkhead, a medic working on her shoulder while the aircraft carried her south towards safety. "This is gonna sting," the medic said, swabbing antiseptic on the razor wire cuts. He was right. It stung like hell. Cassidy didn't flinch. "You're lucky," the medic continued, applying bandages. "None of these are deep enough to need sutures. You'll have scars, but they'll fade." Scars, Cassidy thought, like she didn't have enough already. The ones you could see were the easy ones. It was the invisible scars that killed you slowly, one nightmare at a time. Major Hendricks sat across from her, studying her with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many operators come back from missions they'd never really left. "You want to talk about it?" he asked over the rotor noise. "No, sir. You know they're going to make you talk about it eventually. Debrief, psych eval, the whole 9 yards." "I know." "For what it's worth," Hendricks said, "what you did out there, pursuing the package alone, destroying al-Sistani's network, that's going in the history books. You're probably looking at a silver star, maybe higher." Cassidy stared at the helicopter's floor. "Master Sergeant Crowder should get the medal. He's the one who made it possible." "Crowder." Hendricks pulled out a tablet, scrolled through files. "That's the other member of Overwatch team? KIA during the initial storm?" "Yes, sir. He gave me a chance to complete the mission, sacrificed himself so I could get away." Hendricks made a note on the tablet. "We'll recommend him for the Distinguished Service Cross. Posthumous. Posthumous. Such a clean word for someone being dead." "Sir," Cassidy said quietly, "did you recover his body?" Hendricks looked uncomfortable. "We sent a team to your last known position on the mesa. The storm did significant damage to the area. We're still searching, but—" He trailed off. But Boyd was gone, swallowed by the desert, by the sand, by the storm he'd walked into knowing he'd never come back. Cassidy felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but shifting, settling into a new configuration. Grief, she realized, not the sharp knife of fresh loss, but the dull ache of permanent absence. "He told me once," she said, surprising herself by speaking, "that fear means you're still alive, that the day you stop being scared is the day you're already dead." Smart man. The smartest. Cassidy looked up, meeting Hendricks' eyes. "Sir, I need a favor." "Name it." "When you write up the report, make sure they spell his name right. Boyd Crowder. Crowder. He was from Alabama. 62 years old, 30 years of service. He carried a Bible, and he never missed a shot, and he saved my life at least a dozen times." Her voice cracked. "Make sure they remember him right." Hendricks nodded slowly. "I'll make sure. You have my word." The helicopter banked, heading toward a forward operating base visible in the distance. Rows of tents in prefab buildings surrounded by razor wire, an island of civilization in an ocean of sand. Home. Or as close to home as she was going to get for a while. The debrief lasted 6 hours. They put her in a concrete room with harsh fluorescent lighting and a metal table. 3 intelligence officers, a JAG lawyer, and a recording device. They asked her everything: timeline, actions, casualties, rules of engagement. Cassidy answered mechanically, her voice flat, reciting facts like she was reading from a field manual. She told them about the storm, about Boyd's sacrifice, about the pursuit across 47 kilometers of hostile territory. She told them about the 11 men she'd killed, the compound she'd destroyed, the package she'd secured. She didn't tell them about Boyd's ghost walking beside her. Didn't tell them about the moment at kilometer 41 when she'd wanted to just lie down and let the desert take her. Didn't tell them about how she could still smell burning flesh from the compound, how she tasted smoke every time she swallowed. Some things didn't belong in official reports. Staff Sergeant, the senior intelligence officer said, leaning forward, "You disobeyed a direct order from Thunder Actual. You went dark and proceeded with an unauthorized close reconnaissance that put you in extreme danger. Can you explain that decision?" Cassidy met his eyes. "The mission required it, sir. If I'd waited for authorization, Al-Sistani would have moved the package and we'd have lost him." "That's not your call to make. You're a staff sergeant, not a commander." "No, sir, but I was the only one on the ground. I had the best intel. I made the decision I thought was right." The officer exchanged glances with his colleagues. The JAG lawyer cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant, you understand that disobeying orders in a combat zone is a court-martial offense?" "Yes, sir." "And you're willing to accept the consequences?" Cassidy thought about Boyd, about the thousands of people who were alive today because she'd taken that package off the board, about the weight of 11 bodies on her conscience, and whether adding one more, her own, if it came to that, would even make a difference. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm willing to accept the consequences." The officers conferred in whispers. Finally, the senior officer looked back at her. "You're lucky," he said, "that your insubordination resulted in a major tactical victory. If this had gone sideways, if you'd gotten yourself killed or lost that package, we'd be having a very different conversation." "Understood, sir." "As it is, you'll receive a written reprimand for failure to follow orders. It'll go in your file, but given the circumstances and the outcome, no further action will be taken. You're dismissed, Staff Sergeant." Cassidy stood, saluted, turned to leave. "Graves," the senior officer called. She stopped, looked back. "Off the record, good work out there. Crowder would have been proud." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and walked out. They gave her a cot in a plywood bee hut, privacy curtains, a hot shower. She stood under the water until it ran cold, scrubbing away layers of blood in sand and cordite. When she finally looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back, hollow-eyed, gaunt, older than she remembered. She'd gone into the desert as Staff Sergeant Cassidy Graves, 28 years old, West Texas ranch girl playing soldier. She'd come out as something else, something harder, something broken in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Sleep wouldn't come. She lay on the cot, staring at the plywood ceiling, listening to the FOB's nighttime sounds, generators humming, distant voices, the occasional rumble of a vehicle. Normal sounds, safe sounds. They felt wrong. At 0200, she gave up trying to sleep. She dressed, walked outside into the cool desert night. The sky was clear, stars blazing, the Milky Way a river of light overhead. Boyd had loved nights like this, said they reminded him why he joined up in the first place. Something about protecting a country where people could look up and see stars instead of bombs. "You did good, preacher," she whispered to the darkness. "I finished it, just like you asked." The wind carried her words away into the vast empty. "I don't know what happens now. Don't know how I'm supposed to go back to normal after this. Don't know how to stop seeing your face every time I close my eyes." Silence. "But I'm trying. I'm still here, still fighting. That counts for something, right?" No answer. Of course not. Boyd was gone, and the desert kept its secrets. Cassidy stood there for a long time, looking up at the stars, letting the cool night air wash over her. Eventually, she became aware of someone standing nearby, Major Hendricks, smoking a cigarette, giving her space but making his presence known. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "No, sir." "Yeah, that'll happen." He took a drag, exhaled slowly. "You know the hardest part about coming home from a place like this?" "What's that, sir?" "Nobody back home understands. They see the news, they hear the stories, but they don't really get it, don't understand what it costs." He gestured at her with the cigarette. You paid a price out there, Graves. A heavy one. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. How do you live with it? The question came out before she could stop it. The people you've killed, the friends you've lost. How do you carry that and still function? Hendricks was quiet for a moment. You don't carry it alone. You find other people who've been where you've been, who understand what you've seen. You talk to them. You lean on them. And on the really bad nights, when the ghosts won't leave you alone, you remember why you did it. You remember that every person you killed was trying to kill someone else. Every mission you completed saved lives, even if you can't see them. Does it get easier? No, Hendricks said honestly, but you get stronger, and eventually you figure out how to live with it. Cassidy nodded slowly, not sure if she believed him, but grateful for the honesty. There's a transport leaving for Djibouti at 0600, Hendricks said. You're on it. From there, you'll catch a military flight to Ramstein, then home. 3 weeks of mandatory leave, followed by a psych eval. After that, if you're cleared, back to your unit. And if I'm not cleared, then you get help, which is not a failure, by the way. It's just what you do. Yes, sir. Hendricks finished his cigarette, ground it out under his boot. Get some rest, Graves. You've earned it. He walked away, leaving her alone with the stars in the memories. Cassidy looked up one more time, picked out Polaris, the North Star. Constant, unchanging, a navigation point in the dark. Maybe that's all she needed. A fixed point to aim for, something to guide her home. She went back inside, lay down on the cot, and this time, finally, sleep came. 3 weeks later, Cassidy stood in the parking lot of San Antonio International Airport, duffel bag slung over her shoulder, staring at her father's pickup truck. He was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, looking exactly the way she remembered. Weathered face, worn Stetson, flannel shirt despite the Texas heat. When he saw her, his expression didn't change much. Her father had never been demonstrative, but something softened in his eyes. Hey, Dad, she said, walking over. Cassidy. He pulled her into a brief, hard hug, then stepped back, looking her over. You're too thin. It's been a rough couple months. I bet. He picked up her duffel, tossed it in the truck bed. Your mom's cooking enough food to feed an army, which I guess is appropriate. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, familiar landscape rolling past. Flat land, big sky, the kind of empty space that let you breathe. Cassidy watched it all, feeling something unknot in her chest. You want to talk about it? Her father asked eventually. Not really. Fair enough. He adjusted his grip on the wheel. But if you change your mind, I'm here. Your mom too. We won't understand all of it, but we'll listen. Cassidy felt tears prick her eyes, the first she'd allowed herself since the desert. Thanks, Dad. And Cassidy? Yeah? Whatever happened over there, whatever you had to do, you're still our daughter. Still the girl who could outride and outshoot every boy in the county. Nothing changes that. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They pulled up to the ranch house an hour later. Single story, white paint peeling, surrounded by pastures where cattle grazed in the afternoon heat. Her mother came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron, and Cassidy saw her own future in that face. The lines, the strength, the quiet dignity of women who'd learned to be tough without becoming hard. Welcome home, baby, her mother said, pulling her into a hug that lasted a long time. That night, over dinner, pot roast and potatoes and cornbread, comfort food that tasted like childhood, her father said grace. He thanked God for the food, for the ranch, for family. And at the end, he added, and Lord, we thank you for bringing our daughter home safe. We know she's seen things we can't imagine, done things that took courage we don't have. Watch over her in the days ahead, help her heal, and help us support her however she needs. Amen. Amen, Cassidy whispered. After dinner, she walked out to the back pasture, climbed up on the fence, and watched the sunset. The sky went through its full palette, gold to orange to pink to purple, and she thought about another sunset, in another desert, when Boyd had been alive and the mission had been simple. She pulled out her phone, navigated to her photos. She'd kept one, the picture of Boyd from their first day in country, him scowling at the camera, Bible tucked in his vest. "Made it home, preacher," she said to the image. "Just like you wanted. Don't know what I'm supposed to do now, but I'll figure it out, one day at a time." The wind carried the smell of grass and cattle and home. Cassidy sat there until full dark, then walked back to the house, where the lights were warm and her parents were waiting. The cemetery was on a hill overlooking Arlington, rows of white headstones stretching toward infinity. Cassidy walked among them, her dress uniform crisp and correct, her shoes polished to a mirror shine. She found the stone she was looking for. Master Sergeant Boyd J. Crowder, U.S. Army, 1963 to 2025, Distinguished Service Cross, faithful unto death. They'd never found his body. The storm had taken that from her, the chance for closure, for a proper goodbye. But they'd given him a stone anyway, a place for people to remember. Cassidy knelt, placed her hand on the cold marble. In her other hand, she held a small leather Bible, Boyd's Bible, which they'd found in his quarters and sent to her along with his other effects. "Hey, preacher," she said quietly. "Sorry it took me so long to visit. Had some things to work through." A light wind rustled through the trees. In the distance, a bugler was practicing taps, the mournful notes floating across the hill. "They gave me the Silver Star. Can you believe that? Me, a ranch girl from West Texas. I tried to tell them it should have been yours, but they said we could both have one. So I guess we're medal buddies now." She smiled slightly, wiped her eyes. "I'm doing okay. Some days are harder than others. I still see you sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, giving me that look when I'm about to do something stupid. The therapist says that's normal, that it'll fade with time. I'm not sure I want it to." A family walked past, parents and two children, visiting their own stone. The little girl waved at Cassidy. She waved back. "I've been thinking about what you said, about fear meaning you're still alive, about finishing the mission. I think maybe my mission isn't done yet. There are more packages out there, more bad guys who need stopping, and now I know I can do it. You taught me that." Cassidy stood, squared her shoulders. "So I'm going back, volunteering for another deployment. I know, you'd probably say I'm running from my problems instead of facing them. But maybe running towards something is the same as running away from something else. Either way, I'm moving forward." She placed the Bible at the base of the headstone, along with a small Texas flag she'd brought. "Rest easy, preacher. Your work here is done. Mine's just getting started." She saluted, held it for a long moment, then turned and walked back down the hill. Behind her, the wind picked up, rustling the flag, turning pages in the Bible. And somewhere, in a desert far away, sands shifted and settled, and the ghosts kept their watch, and the war went on.